Right. I'll light the candle and do the dedication of offerings. And I'll just, out of interest, just ring the bell once loudly and just wonder if you can hear it. Yeah, good. I got a thumbs up. Great. And then I assume it cuts out. Yes, very quickly. You just hear it and then it cuts out. Right. Okay. But still, at least you hear it, which is great. Wonderful. Yoso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho Swakato Yena Bhagavata Dhammo Supatipanno Yasa Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Tamayam Bhagavantam Sadamam Sasangham Imehi sakare hiyataraham aropite abhipujayama sadhuno bhante bhagava suchiraparini bhutopi pachima janatanukam pamasa Ime sakare dukatapanna karabhute patikan hatu amhakam vidharatam hitaya sukaya araham samma sambuddho bhagava buddham bhagavantam abhivademi. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Andamayam Buddhasa Bhagavato Puravaganamakaram Karamase Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Right, we now go to the 3 refuges and 5 precepts on page 128. And we'll do the Namo Tassa again, just do the whole formal taking of the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. And then we go to the 5 Precepts on page 129. And we'll do that in Pali and in English. Anatipata Vyarimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana Vyarimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kame sume chachara Vyarimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada Vyarimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Surameraya Majja Pamadatana Vyarimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugatim yanti, silena bhogasampada, silena nibutim yanti, tasma silam visodaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll bow 3 times. Just make ourselves comfortable. The benefit of having a regular class is that it provides an opportunity for us to sit in silence together. And the structure of a class with the chanting at the beginning, as it were, sets the scene. It creates some supportive associations. I have seen actually, and can also imagine in my own case that when I'm on my deathbed, hopefully not too painfully, I'll respond in a positive way to hearing some chanting. The associations will be probably somewhere deeply embedded in the in one's brain and one's body. Maintaining a state of present moment awareness as one's life comes to an end, making it a peaceful transition. So as you've probably heard many times, but it's always worth reiterating, our practice is actually, strange as it may sound, not about achieving an objective or an aim. Is about actually abandoning aims and objectives and just coming into the present moment just as it is. So positioning the body in such a way that it's upright, relaxed, but not too relaxed, not floppy. And just being patient. Just allowing the present moment to become more intensely present. Just allowing thoughts to begin to settle. and shifting attention away from the thoughts, more to the body. Not pushing anything, you might still be caught up in thoughts and feelings about the day, unfinished business. It's inevitable. So our usual experience is we become aware of the present moment, which is meditation, being aware, being present, being mindful. That is more often than not sustained for a little while. And then the mind quite naturally starts wandering off to pastures new, which is absolutely normal. And then there's the next moment of mindfulness when we suddenly notice that we have wandered off, that the mind has wandered off. And there's an immediate coming back into the present moment. That's meditation. And then we come back to the body, to the breath. So this is a cycle. So we're both participating in the process and experiencing it. It's very easy to have some recrimination towards oneself, criticism about the mind wandering. Well, the injunction here is don't. It's just the mind doing what it does all the time. Wandering as things come up, noticing thoughts, memories. So this little journey from present moment to losing the present moment, coming back to the present moment without passing judgment on oneself. Allows us to come to terms with the way the mind works, without criticism, but with discernment, knowing what's happening. After a while, can be weeks, can be months, can be years, we can actually stay present to the mind doing its coming and going. And develops an ability to maintain a sort of background awareness to the coming and going as we come and go. As we tune into the body, we notice more and more about the sensations of the body. It doesn't take much effort to notice the breathing, the breath, as it comes and goes in a cycle of becoming and passing. We can notice if we're breathing through the nose or through the mouth. We can notice the touch of air against the body as it enters the body through the nostrils, flows down the windpipe, through the heart region into the lungs, pushes down on the diaphragm, and then leaves the body, having unloaded all the oxygen that we need. If our minds aren't still too agitated, we can notice the stillness, the background stillness behind our breathing, behind any sounds that might be arising where we're sitting. You might hear the white noise of silence. Behind all the sounds that arise, whether it be traffic or people or noises in the background. And at some point, you might notice the body quite naturally, spontaneously, without any conscious intention, taking in a slightly deeper in-breath, followed by a relaxing out-breath and detensioning. This may happen quite spontaneously, and it's a good sign, it's a nice sign. Some of the tension that's built up during the day is discharging, there's a letting go, which can happen quite naturally, without any conscious effort. Even though we're only connected by the medium of our devices, on some subtle level, we're creating a shared energy field. So however many of us there are, whether it be 20 or 30, I don't know, 30 points of localized consciousness present. In a shared field of awareness. So we have the experience of the body, the weight of the body on the cushion or the chair or the seat that we're sitting on. And the sensations of the rib cage expanding subtly and contracting with each in and out breath. We have the experience of the air entering the body and leaving the body with each in breath and out breath. We have the experience of our skin exposed to the air and those parts of the body which are clothed. If we're sitting cross-legged, we may feel something in our knees and our legs. The hands may be interlocked, touching. On the face, we can notice any tension on the forehead, in the temples, jaw, ears, the head, the neck. Some of the sensations will be neutral. Some will be quite pleasant. Some perhaps a little bit less so. So those are feeling qualities there of pleasurable, unpleasurable, or neutral. Just discerning the quality of the sensations or feelings in the body. You can also observe and notice our general mind state. Whether we're relaxed, at ease, or perhaps a little bit tense in the mind. Some issue in the background, trying to grab our attention, perhaps. So we notice our general state of mind and thought process or reflective process arising and flowing through the mind. There's an internal investigation, exploration. The body of the body and the mind. those are the four foundations of mindfulness. The body, the feelings or the quality of the sensations of the body, whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Third is the general state of mind, the overall sense of being, dispirited, content, foggy. Just recognizing what it's like in the here and now. And the contents of the mind is the fourth. Tricky territory to enter because we spend most of our time living in the mind and its capacity to project into the future or remember the past. So we can connect with this feeling of presence, of I amness, and see that it's full of changing phenomena. We can observe this phenomena. We do notice this phenomena without any effort. But we usually interfere with it, get caught up in the contents of the phenomena. So our practice is just to let go and observe. Let go and observe. Let go and observe. towards the end of a sitting, you might start noticing elements of mild discomfort. The body, unless deeply asleep, is generally unaccustomed to sitting still for longer periods of time, unless it's caught up in a film or a book where there's some dramatic, exciting, attention-grabbing material. So we tend to be quite happy if we're sitting comfortably and relaxed. That is how we deal with the discomfort, but is also part of our awareness developing practice. So we notice the subtle reactions that arise in the body as it starts feeling perhaps a little bit uncomfortable. We might notice the sort of micro tensions building in as we try and hold a position or a posture. So it's good practice just to breathe in, allow oneself to feel aware of that point of tension, and on the exhalation, just relax into it as we breathe out. And just see the difference. Does it impact ever so slightly or more than slightly on our experience of that bit of tension? Does the tension dissipate a little bit as we relax into it? Not resisting, not fighting through. We actually change our relationship to the discomfort, almost welcoming it, and as we relax into it. And change it from mildly unpleasant to acceptable, to bearable, or perhaps let it dissipate completely. Each one of us will be having our own experience. But this is a way one could use the words of training the mind, allowing the mind to learn not to react instinctively with aversion to something that's uncomfortable. It's allowing oneself to broaden one's window of acceptance, just to be with things as they are. If it's a little bit uncomfortable, it's still manageable. Obviously, we don't push it too far. We're not masochists or sadists. It's just experimenting on the boundaries of our ability and capacity to deal with unpleasantness without getting consumed or possessed by a strong reaction. So we just allow the breathing process to continue, breathing in, breathing out, relaxing on the out breath, keeping attention on the flow of air and oxygen as it enters the body, and relaxing and noticing as the body exhales. And when I ring the bell, which I'll do in a second or two, just notice any changes that arise or happen when the bell rings, signaling the end of formal sitting, as it were. And just sit through the bell and stay sitting for a while after, and only then start letting go, adjusting the body, releasing any pressure or tension that might have built up. So feel free to relax, move, stretch the body as you need to. You can say thank you to the body. I don't have any specific theme to address or talk to. Very open to any questions or suggested themes that might come to your mind, so do feel free to share either a question or a reflection, and we'll see where it takes us. And in the meantime, I'll just see what comes up in my consciousness as a possible subject to talk about, to address. Yes, Andy. Can you unmute yourself? Is it unmuting, or should we ask Wendy? You can't unmute. Okay, let me see if I can do anything to do that. Andy, let's see what happens. Well, interesting enough, I can only ask you to unmute. Does that do anything different?
You can unmute
so,
now.
yeah.
I did it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right.
Nick, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. I was just thinking about what you were saying earlier about the classes being on Zoom and in person. And first of all, I think there are lots of meditations that you can attend either in person on Zoom these days. And the meditation is an important part of it, but also the opportunity to do the chanting and go for refuge at the beginning is equally as important, if not possibly more important for me, because it allows me to connect with more the heart mind rather than the thinking mind. So to be able to gather as a Sangha in this way, even remotely, is really beneficial. And also to the point about it being on Zoom or in person. I live in Brighton, so I wouldn't be able to attend these. So I really appreciate this opportunity because of the way that it sets my mind up for the practice. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I do hope that you do continue on Zoom as well as hybrid in the future.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's been appreciated by the Buddhist Society that many people can't come too far to travel or inconvenient. And so the idea is to try and get the hybrid ones going so that it can be a bit of both, so that you can participate and others like you and those who want to come in can have the physical connection. And maybe if you happen to be in London on a Monday, you can actually do the physical bit as well. But yeah, we're going to make sure that we maximize the capacity or opportunities to join the classes. So thank you.
The chanting is especially important to me too, for the Buddhist point of view. So I wanted to emphasize that really.
Okay, I'll take the hint. We'll do a bit more chanting next time.
No, I mean, I'm just saying there's a lot of classes that don't do anything like that, a lot of meditations that don't do anything of that nature at all. So that's I like this.
That's nice. I think it's quite an important aspect of one's practice to allow and even cultivate. It definitely alters one's state of consciousness, one's mind. As you say, it changes one's relationship to the sitting. Just singing alone, which is effectively what chanting is. We know that it activates the brain centers differently just to conversation or to thinking. It's a much more unifying experience, which is why singing in a choir is such a healthy and beneficial activity. So we're essentially creating our own little choir every time we chant. And of course, the theme of the chants usually there's usually a theme in it. I know I chanted only in Pali this evening, but of course, if you can download the chanting book, you can read the reflections which those chants contain. And of course, for a monk or a nun, they have to learn these chants off by heart. And they repeat them and chant them much more frequently than we do as lay people. So they really have a reserve of, they have a library inside of them of chants that they can connect with. And that, of course, gives material for reflection, because they're usually related to the Dhamma in some form or another, to suffering, release from suffering, different states of mind are covered by it, aspirations, which we will do later on, of sharing practice with others. So yes, it's a heart-opening exercise, it can be. But then it's worth remembering also that doing something repeatedly, the mind has a capacity to adapt and start switching off and just doing things automatically. And that's part of one's practice. One goes through the inspiring bits, and then they're almost inevitably followed at some point with not so much disillusionment, but sort of boring repetitiveness, that the mind no longer gets activated in a pleasant way by the inspiring aspects of the chant, the potential inspiring aspects of the chant. And that's also practice, because we're dealing with a conditioned state. The chanting is a set of conditions, and all conditions come and go. Our relationship to those conditions also changes. So it provides food for reflection, that even the most inspiring thought can, after a while, fall apart and actually become no longer inspiring, no longer trigger us. But what remains, and this is the important part, is our awareness of how we're feeling. It's the importance of being aware of whatever condition the mind happens to be in, because our awareness is not conditioned. It's the contents of our awareness that are conditioned. So actually one starts with a longer practice to go through all the inspiring ups, perhaps inspirational meditations, and then we go through the disappointments as well. Because what we're always doing all the time to some degree or other, unconsciously or more consciously, is looking for pleasant experiences, something that makes us feel good. And of course, the nature of conditioned existence is that it can't always be good. It is what it is for a certain period of time, then it runs out of steam, and a cycle happens. It disintegrates and then comes back again in one form or another. So even our chanting practice, our meditation practice, exposes us to conditions, the changing nature of conditions. And that in turn allows us to develop insight as a sort of recognition. So this is what happens. And that waking up moment actually, in its own way, is quite uplifting, but uplifting not on the basis of a condition, but on the basis of an insight, of a recognition of a truth, and a sort of settling in of that truth and embedding of that truth, where we say, right, okay, so it's like this, at which point there's an integration and alignment between our experience and our awareness, and less conflict. So that's quite a long answer. I hope it's made sense to you, but very interesting how your question can trigger off a train of associations and thoughts, which I'm happy to share with you. But thank you very much for mentioning that. Yes, Marjorie, I see your hand went up. Again, you have to unmute yourself if you can. And if not, Wendy, there we go. You're online.
Actually, it's a continuation from what you said. And it's to do with awareness, saying what is. And if I was walking down the stairs and I was aware, I would think, yes, the insight, what is now is I am walking down the stairs and I might feel some of the senses. But if somebody said to me, was I aware? I was aware walking down the stairs. I would think there's no knower there. There's no person. There was just me with shedding the light of illumination of awareness walking down the stairs. And right. I just wondered if that was the same with you. So if somebody said, was I aware I was walking down the stairs? I think, well, there was no me in it. I was just walking down the stairs. That's how it was. No knower.
Absolutely. Because the knowing is quite impersonal. That's the whole teaching of the Buddha, is that experience is impersonal, that there is no person. The person that this idea that we are a person is an idea, it's a construct, it's a conditioned understanding of ourselves. And you're touching on the heart of practice, essentially. And what we're, in a sense, trying to do, and that's what makes it so difficult, is just to get to that understanding that you've just put into words, that actually articulating something, putting something into the words, and even being aware of being aware, that the awareness of being aware is always before, as it were, the event. It's always present. There's just it can be just called a knowing of how it is, without articulating it or making it into an object. So yes, I can't add anything to what you said. You're absolutely spot on. So thank you very much for sharing that. It's really lovely to hear you say that, because it's so, so true.
Thank you.
The moment we articulate a thought or a feeling, or even what we're aware of, we're creating a representation of something. It's secondhand. Whereas awareness is absolutely in direct, immediate contact. It's actually in the place that it's all arising. And that place is completely timeless, doesn't have a beginning and doesn't end, because it's always present. It doesn't get lost in time. But our thinking about things does create ideas, thoughts, because that's how our mind has been conditioned by evolution. Yeah. And we have this incredible capacity to create futures, remember the past as if they were real. And of course, because of the pressures of survival, we're always trying to anticipate the future in some way. So we're inevitably thinking about it. And we're usually thinking about it, how do I stay alive? How do I get what I want? How can I be happy? And that, as it were, influences so many of our words, deeds, and actions, and how we lead our lives. So the practice of awareness or mindfulness in a Buddhist context is to, as it were, step back a little bit from that and just observe the process and see what happens on the level of reactivity or on our emotions, on our minds, as this phenomena flows through this ever-present field of awareness that we're actually in all of the time. And that's the only way to, as it were, overcome the anxieties and fears of existence, worries about existence, about death, illness, which actually are there in the background and actually just from the physical level are potential threats to what we consider our body. It isn't our body actually, but we say it is. we know it well, we get very attached to it, and for convenience's sake, we do refer to it as our body, my body. It just helps differentiate who's who in the strange, as it were, localized points of consciousness that we all are. But actually the consciousness that we share with others is the same consciousness, but we just identify and create labels and names and get very defensive or aggressive depending on our conditioned natures. So yes, thank you very much, Marjorie. That's really great. Lovely. Thank you. Yes, Mariano.
Hi. Yeah, I got a nice one for you. I will be talking to some people who are trying to introduce mindfulness in hospitals, pain management, and so on. And I got the terror of mentioning anything related to spirituality, the context really. So the trick there is to give them a good idea of what is really involved and the sense of direction, because they will be delivering to people of all sort of backgrounds, so that they won't be able to name Buddhas or even gratitude, is already too far away and so on. And one of the issues, well, a couple of the issues that come to mind are, one, it tends to go into spiritual bypassing, avoiding emotions rather than opening up to them. Yeah, so people sit there and try to bypass the emotional upsets, and then they get upset because meditation is no use when strong emotions come along. Another one is, I had people come to me and say that, yes, they love mindfulness and so on. And even if I miss one day, I feel it in my body. It is a kind of addiction. It becomes an addiction to a ritual, and it doesn't carry really. Yeah, it becomes almost an obstacle. They got an extra addiction to deal with. And I was wondering what your thoughts would be, helpful advice there, what is really essential, and bear in mind that they are not Buddhists. They might be, but they are not.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's quite a complex picture. I don't know the people involved or exactly the context from what you're describing.
They are medics and the like, and they are trying to introduce it in hospitals and hospitals.
Why are they trying to introduce it into the hospitals? What is their motive? What is their understanding? What are they trying to do?
Because mindfulness is all the rage these days, and there are studies, and their hospitals need to come up to standards and do the latest thing and so on and so forth. And they might have some personal experience themselves, so that it can be helpful. And
mm-hmm. Well, I think it's quite possible, and I do it a lot in my own work, to teach and share mindfulness awareness practice without any mention of spirituality. It doesn't have to have that label at all. You can just call it as an inquiry and an investigation into experience. And that just paying attention to how we're feeling brings about changes and reactions. So you can lead them in a meditation like we did this evening. I have to cast my mind back to what I was saying, but I don't think I said anything about spirituality per se in our sitting this evening. It was all about sensations, the different qualities of sensations, just being present. And at the same time, all you can do is just basically speak from your experience and your understanding. And if people accept it, all well and good. If they don't, then they'll leave or walk away. But there's no problem. You're just sharing awareness practice. And you can call it attentional training, awareness practice, mindfulness, consciousness training.
Another aspect that comes to mind, it won't be me teaching anyway. I'm just advising people who would be doing it. Another aspect that comes to mind is that they got a tendency to see it as a special activity that lasts half an hour or whatever. An hour is far too long, and it is disconnected to daily practice. So it doesn't become mindfulness in daily life. Yeah, it is isolated, and but also the attitude towards the experience. Are we, opening up, and are we being generous with life as it comes along, or are we constantly trying to push away and judge and moan and complain?
I think the line to take is, consider this an exploration, a process of self-inquiry. How do I react? How do I experience resistance? How do I experience pleasure? What does it do to me? How do I react just to sitting quietly? It's about self-examination, self-inquiry. Well, that doesn't have to be spiritual. It is spiritual, essentially, I think, but one doesn't have to use that word at all. And if they're just beginning and learning to teach because it's something that's popular, well, they'll be coming with all sorts of attitudes, perceptions, and they won't find it necessarily interesting. Well, how does it feel not to feel interested? Where do they feel it in the body? How do they experience this whole process of learning something that they don't quite understand or approve of or find themselves critical of? They can ask themselves, should they be doing it then? What, is this because the job is mandating it? Well, they're getting the wrong end of the stick. You don't tell them that, but you say, well, it's a very personal journey. Some people find it interesting, some people don't. But what people tend to do, they impose a construct on an activity, especially a new one. They have ideas about it. So they have to explore all of them. But it requires, as we all know, I suppose for everybody in this group this evening, yes, that it's only over time that one starts getting the benefit of it. And that's why all the MBSR trainings, put you through several weeks of training just to sort of embed something in a structured way, which then hopefully develops its own momentum and continues out of curiosity and because of the benefits that come from it. So I think the way you communicate your understanding, the way you communicate your presence, your listening skills, your ability to be with them, not to get phased when they get critical or angry, just speaking as you speak here. That's the best way to spread the way things are to other people. Generosity, you forget about the spiritual dimension. Being generous is known in psychological studies to increase well-being. It's nice to give things and be generous with one's time or one's skills or abilities. It breaks down the sense of separation. It allows one to work and live in greater harmony. Greater harmony creates benefits of well-being. If we're in harmony with our environment, we feel better. So there's a direct correlation between mindfulness practice or awareness practice and how we experience everyday life. So there are plenty of quote unquote psychological positives that come out of the practice of mindfulness. And you can direct them to websites on happiness, psychological understanding of happiness. And it will include, amongst others, generosity. Well, that's not because the Buddha said, practice loving kindness. All he was doing basically is emphasizing what we know from experience, that being in harmony, feeling close to other people is an essential part of being human and feeling good about oneself. You don't have to go into metaphysics or the jhanas or the deeper states of meditation practice, but it might come up. But anyhow, I hope I've pointed something helpful out.
Thank you.
Continuing on this theme of sharing the Dhamma in a sort of non-spiritual way, it's very easily done with the Buddhist practice. Obviously, there's that whole dimension that Andy was talking about, that we spoke about earlier, in terms of chanting and rituals and rites, which are very supportive to practice. And in fact, that's how they're even understood in the Buddhist tradition. What a one of the first fetters actually is one of the first three fetters is seeing through rites and rituals as being just rites and rituals. They're not an end in themselves, they're a means to an end. So even the Buddhist teachings themselves in some way are able to categorize something which is very embedded in most traditions, which is rites and rituals. But that's not the purpose, that's not the aim. They're a functional way of eliciting a state of mind which is conducive to insight and being open. So what you can do quite easily is talk about, what, and literally use the same words. What are the characteristics of existence? Well, existence isn't a spiritual state. It's just simply, the way things are. Well, everything is changing all the time. Well, nobody's going to deny that. No scientist is going to deny that. No rational person is going to deny that things are changing all the time. Okay, what are the implications of that? Well, it means that whatever we invest our energy in has a certain lifespan. It'll change, it'll be different, which means there'll be some disappointment involved. Well, what's that disappointment? In Buddhist terms, we'd use the word dukkha, but we don't use the word dukkha. We just say there's an element of loss, of suffering, when we lose what we're attached to or what we want or what we've got. So how do we deal with that? Well, we come to terms with it because life doesn't revolve around our needs. We can make it revolve around our needs, but actually there is a perspective which just starts accepting the fact that life is changing. If we can accept the fact that things change, we tend to be consistently happier and in a better frame of mind because we're not having to let go of something we're holding on to. And if we are holding on to it, we can notice that. So our practice of attention, awareness, allows us to notice how we hold on to something when in fact everything else is saying that it's time for it to end. Well, that's a psychological challenge. So whether it's a therapeutic context, a psychological context, one of those mindfulness contexts, the truth is the same. It doesn't belong to anybody. That's the nature of reality. And essentially, we can't be happy if we are in disharmony with the way things are. It's a contradiction in terms almost. And we can reflect on this relationship that we have to our experiences and see what we do with these experiences. So mindfulness is simply an investigative process into what arises in consciousness and seeing what we can learn from it that changes our relationship to experience. But notice in our conversation now and what I'm saying, there's not a word of spirituality except unless I refer to it as spirituality. It's just common sense, or it has a logic, it has a rationale to it, which people can agree with or disagree with. So they're free to disagree. Fortunately, we live in a free society. We don't live in Russia or China or North Korea. We can actually say what we think and feel, as long as it's not abusive and criminally suspect in some way or other. So, you have a wonderful opportunity by the sound of it to share just insights which don't belong to Buddhism. Buddhism refers to them, identifies them, communicates them, but it communicates them not for them to be believed in because it's a belief system. Asks us to inquire, investigate, and find out for ourselves. Well, what could be more scientific than that? I would say. So I think it's important to sort of translate the, when we think of it, all these Buddhist teachings, date back 2,500 years. That's an incredibly long time. Civilizations have come and gone, history's come and gone, technology's come, wars, revolutions, mass extinction, plagues, all sorts of things have been happening. And yet the core teachings are simply experience-based investigation of experience. And it's, we have a barrier in terms of especially in the Theravada tradition, because of course it's using language and terms and concepts which date back a very long time. So we have to go through a certain familiarization and translation of those archaic languages into something that makes sense to us in our culture, in our time, and with our thought processes and world perspectives. So I was just thinking, you know, I don't know whether this will work or not, but if we look at a chant, for instance, you know, which is in Pali, it's often a verbatim translation of what the Buddha said. So let's just see if we can find one and just go through it just a little bit in some of the time that we have. Let's go to page 37. And as it were, see what happens. So the Buddha's words on loving kindness. We chant this, most of us are familiar with it to some degree or other, and it already has a connection with loving kindness and feelings of well-being. But loving kindness doesn't belong to Buddhism. You can't claim it as a Buddhist practice. It's something that is encouraged, and there's a rationale to it. So what are the injunctions? These are the Buddha's words. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness. Well, that's a choice. Do you want to be good? What does goodness mean? Yeah. But it's someone who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path to peace. Well, some people aren't interested in peace. They want sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Fine. The world is all there for you. Question is, does it bring peace? Does it bring well-being? Does it bring about goodness? Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech. Well, these are injunctions of how we can be, and it's something worth aspiring to. To be humble and not conceited. Well, Rudyard Kipling spoke about that as well, and many, many others have spoken about humility. What does humility mean? It means one's open to other perspectives and other points of view. It's the opposite of arrogance and pride. To be contented and easily satisfied. Well, that's a nice feeling. Who likes constantly craving for things that we can't have? What suffering that is, yes. So it's minimizing suffering, being contented and easily satisfied. Being unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways. Well, they may suffer with the frugal bit, but being unburdened with duties, what's the big complaint of our time and age? Stress, having to do so many thousands of things, to be bombarded by data that one has to respond to. So being peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, well, these are wonderful states of mind. And what has spirituality got to do with that? One could say. One doesn't have to even mention spirituality. These are all states of mind. And being not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Well, that's really important, you know. We learn from other people. We aren't born knowing all the answers. So we try and learn, and hopefully we learn from people who are wiser than we are. Again, no mention of spirituality here. It's just about learning things that we don't know initially, but people can point us to. So good teachers, good parents, good fellow students or fellow travelers are all opportunities to learn. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later approve. And then wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at peace. Well, that's a state of mind, not ever or at ease. May all beings be at ease. So, you know, that's just the first 3 paragraphs. The fact that the Buddha said them is just a reflection on his insight and understanding of the factors or the elements that make up a good person. Yes, and what loving kindness is and the effects it can have. So one could do this whole chant or this whole teaching of the Buddha's words on loving kindness and not really struggle with any spiritual belief systems. Of course, where it does get interesting is the very last one. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, is freed from all sense desires and is not born again into this world. Well, even that can be translated into something contemporary and non-quote-unquote spiritual. Not being born again into this world is the process that we're going through all the time of becoming. The moment we get an idea or an opinion or something to go for, there is a moment of becoming. We're, as it were, born into being, wanting something. So one can see it on a life basis, that we come out of one existence and then are reborn again as the rebirth teachings go. But we don't have to even believe in that. We can interpret those words as actually just being born. We have a peaceful life, and suddenly we see an advertisement for a car that we want, and suddenly a craving, a longing for that object or a new phone or whatever it might be. And at that moment, something is born which creates suffering. So being freed from all sense desires, and of course it's the sense desire that creates the birthing, the becoming. So again, a psychological mechanism kicks in. I want something, I immediately become somebody who wants something. So this simple, beautiful teaching of loving kindness actually is about being whole, being complete, being in harmony with the way things are, and seeing loving kindness as actually a reflection of the unity that arises in consciousness. So I see that time is passing, and I was going to chant the whole thing together with you all, but maybe we should go for something simpler and a bit shorter, which is the reflections on universal well-being. So maybe we'll end on that. See, even our time is a construct, but still, it's one we have to live with. So what page is universal, reflections on universal well-being? Page 41. If you're using the chanting book, if not, Wendy will put it up. So I think we'll do the reflections on universal well-being. Thank you, Wendy. And then we'll do the closing homage and say our goodbyes. So we'll just sit just for a little bit. And this is quite non-spiritual as well. This is just generating a sense of well-being for ourselves and for others. Applies to medics and non-medics as well. So now let us chant the reflections on universal well-being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. Such a beautiful chant. Nothing spiritual about it, and totally spiritual. Yeah, very nice. No psychologist worth his weight would find fault with that. Right. So we'll close with a closing homage. Just as I mentioned, if someone joined us a little bit late, next week Martin will be taking the class, and then that's the 11th, I think. And then the final class will be on the 18th, which will be taken by Ajahn Chah series. She'll be closing. And then we'll have a break, a summer holiday, but not a holiday from meditation, an opportunity for self-practice and hopefully health and well-being. And then I believe we'll meet again on the 12th of September after that. So you might want to make a note in your diaries that the classes start again on the 12th of September. And what we will do, hopefully, all being well, is start having hybrid classes. So for me, it'll mean a trek into the Buddhist Society to Victoria, and not my meditation room where I am at the moment, where I feel very comfortable, but I'll make the journey because I think it's important that we do meet in person as well. So we'll do the closing homage. I'll just ring the bell. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivadeni. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Right, well, good night, everybody. Keep well, and look forward to seeing you. I'll try and see if I can join Chantasiri on the 18th and see some of you then. So
Thank you,
take
Nick.
care, everybody.